Eddie, thank you so much for being on the Soulish podcast. It is so wonderful to have you on as a guest. And we connected because I've had Kevin on the podcast a few times, and you worked with him and are good friends with him. And so we got to connect that way. And the work you do is so cool, so unique. I have never heard of it. And I just love the freedom aspect and getting rid of shame and guilt aspect of what you do. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk about ecstatic dancing and body freedom and all, all that.
I'm just as excited to talk about it. And yeah, Whitney, thanks for having me here.
Yeah. So you and I chatted, and you were sharing with me about ecstatic dance. And I'm sure some of my audience knows what this is. I actually realized after our call that that's kind of a big deal in Denver, Colorado. There's ecstatic dance places here. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like, I'd never heard about this. And now look, I live where there are ecstatic dancing places. So can you explain what ecstatic dance is, and maybe even just like specifically what you do as well? Because I'm sure you have a unique flavor to it.
Of course. And before I go into that, I'd love to just hear what was your experience when you looked up ecstatic dance? What were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were just like liberation, just coming outside of what you think you need to look like and how you need to express yourself. And you just do you.
Yes.
And whatever you do, it looks good on you because you're just being authentic and real.
Yes. Well, all right. I don't have anything to say. You just summed it up. But
that's one way to do that.
Exactly. So that seriously does sum it up, though. Obviously, we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. But what I heard is liberation. Huge, 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 huge. And especially the aspect of like just doing yourself. It doesn't matter how it looks. And maybe you can relate. Like everybody has been at like a wedding or a club or a dance or some sort of place where they've seen someone just going absolutely like crazy. And maybe their dancing style doesn't look that like appealing, but you can just tell that that person is like high on life, right? And that is what I think of when I think of ecstatic dance, because when you talk about like the liberation aspect, this is the liberation, the releasing our inhibitions, right? You know, a lot of people like use alcohol at these clubs to like loosen up, and there's nothing wrong with that substance. But at the same time, I discovered ecstatic dance, and let me just take us back a little bit. I grew up not even wanting to dance ever. Like I may be coming across, I'm here on the podcast, we're talking about dance, we're doing all that stuff, we're talking about personal freedom. All of that used to be the opposite for me. I, for a majority of my life, was a super awkward kid, super like socially, like just like socially aware, but like really awkward of it, like always thinking about how I look and double checking what I'm going to say and overthinking everything. And maybe you or anybody listening can relate to a certain extent, but especially at like dances and stuff growing up in school, I never liked dancing. And the only time you would ever catch me dancing is if everybody else was, and I was the odd one out if I wasn't. Right. And then a few years ago, I ended up, and obviously life happens, quite a bit has happened between then and where I am now. But a few years ago, I was out traveling, and I went out to this space in Bali, Indonesia. And one of my friends that I was out there with, he introduced me to something called ecstatic dance. And I was like, what's ecstatic dance? And we go to this place, and you know, you think like in the middle of the jungle in this like big like wooden, like I don't know if bungalow is the right word, but you're just kind of in this like big space. It's like elevated, big wood floor, tons of people, music just like doing the thing, and everyone's just going nuts. When I say nuts, I mean like I was looking at people being like, what are these people on? Because you got people like rolling around on the floor, all sweaty, like making weird faces, just going rah, like all over the place. And I'm like, did I miss the memo on what drugs I was supposed to take before coming here, or like what's happening? But I noticed that people were sober. Like I was also within that, I was still able to look at someone and realize, all right, this person isn't just completely out of their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, so this is the dance. This is people having fun. And it looked like a ton of fun. But I also noticed there was a whole bunch of resistance in me to actually like going there, to like really like going there, because I had all these stories and these thoughts that were in the back of my head of what's it going to look like if I'm doing that? What are the people behind me in this like mosh, not even a mosh pit because it's not like violent, but what are the other people in this sea of humans going to think if they see me going in the like weird motion like that? And the more I thought about it, the more I kind of look around, look behind me, and I'm like, Eddie, who is looking at you? Literally no one here is looking at you. Everyone's in their own world, just kind of like doing their own thing. And so that started to help me like kind of ease into the experience. So I went from kind of just like typical, like, yeah, have a good time, to
Raise
like,
the roof.
yeah. Went from just kind of like doing what I thought I was supposed to do to like, ooh, like, I'm feeling this, and it's obviously been a process. I've been to tons and tons of ecstatic dances since, and what leads me into some of the work that I do now. I mean, I used to be a DJ at a roller skating rink, and so obviously taking those skills of DJing and speaking to these crowds of like 200, 300, 400 people and like facilitating this experience, I've just been able to take that into my ecstatic dance and like kind of transformational work, like just shifting contexts of those containers. But yeah, so going through all these dances, because it's not like just one dance did it for me. That one dance was huge. But at that
Yeah.
moment, I just started to fall in love with it because I realized how free I felt during it. And not even just how free I felt, but also how that was just a metaphor for everything else in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Realizing that on the dance floor, I was thinking of, oh, what are they going to think if I do this? Is it going to be okay? Are they going to think I'm going crazy or stupid? I had the same conversation happening about 1,000 other things in my life aside from dance. And so I've really been using ecstatic dance specifically as a tool to look at my life in a different way, to reverse engineer my feelings of absolute freedom and figure out how I can have that in other aspects of my life too. Um, Obviously, there's a lot more I could go into here, but did that kind of start to answer your question
Oh,
about
yeah.
ecstatic
That
dance?
gave us a good background. So I want to go kind of into your journey. Um, I think we all were like an awkward junior hire at some point. And even I, like, I mean, typically girls, they like pack together, right? In like those junior high school dances. And I remember one time I was dancing and I realized, oh, I know how to move my booty. I got this. I'm 12. I got this down, man. And so I was like,
Yes.
just like wiggling
Hey, I
like
just
crazy.
figured that out.
And oh my God, my like other 12-year-old friend, she was like, yeah, you might want to like not do that so often. And I was like, got it. Okay, embarrassed. So that was my experience. And in high school, I just was like, dude, I don't even want to go. I never even went to prom because it just was not something, like dancing just was not something that I really felt comfortable with. And I just didn't even like the environment either, just because it was really, judgy and how high school is anyway, for most people, not everybody, but most. But I love your story and your background. And you mentioned, rollerblading rink. Is that what it is? Roller skating rink.
Yeah,
Um,
roller skating, rollerblading.
Rollerblading, roller skating, either one, east, west.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we
um,
did both.
yeah. But I think it'd be really cool to share about your journey and just how you came to be who you are right now as Eddie Evolves, which I love. I love that name. How has Eddie evolved?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been obviously it's been quite the journey. And you know, we can go 1,000 places with this. Um, but to sort of, because this could turn into a whole 2-hour story, and maybe we can do another podcast sometime to dive into any of the
Oh, we
specifics
will.
here. But um when I think about my life story, I think back to a really, really pivotal moment in my life. or a few of them actually. So first of all, there came to be a point um, when I was about 10 years old where things were not good at all in my life. My
Mm,
family, I was having so much trouble with my family, just like angry at my parents, angry at God, angry at the world, angry at everything. Um, I was blessed to be born with a younger brother who has high functioning autism, and
mm,
been absolutely amazing growing up with that. It's also been very challenging, but especially at the time, as I was like 10, my younger brother was like 7. This is right as like we were starting to be like, what even is autism? Because no one even knew what that was.
right.
Um, and so I was kind of at this point where I didn't have a whole lot of support because my parents were putting a whole bunch into that. And any problems I had were just kind of like extra. It's kind of like, oh, Eddie, yeah, that's a problem, but at least you're not this. So I didn't really feel I had support at home. And I
Mm,
wasn't getting support in the churches. I wasn't getting support from my therapist. Like I was doing a whole bunch of things. And even in school, I was getting bullied and just things were just kind of at like an all-time low for me. And I
mm,
got to this point where I was like very seriously debating suicide. And I had actually got to a point of even like writing a letter and going through the whole process, like just pretty much being in my room, which um, was quite a moment for me where I was actually about to do it. And I share this because obviously that experience was very heavy for me, and I've done quite a bit of work since then. But that was a moment where what stopped me from going all the way was this idea that just hit me right before when I was
mhm.
in that moment of like having to make a decision. This idea hit me. I was like, you know what? What if life could get better? Like, and it's like this moment of wisdom just hit me out of nowhere, where it's as if some wise version of myself just showed up and was like, hey, Eddie, like, you're only 10 years old, right? Like, there's people grow up, things can change. This doesn't have to be your life forever.
Right.
And that really stuck with me. And obviously it wasn't an overnight story about how things pivoted, but that was just an idea that at least got me to kind of like let go and just like start thinking about things a little differently.
Mm,
Um, so fast forwarding, not much changed. Still kept having problems. Still kept getting bullied for the next like 3-4 years until I ended up finding a friend group that I actually felt really included with. Because prior to that, like anyone I tried to be friends with, I felt like I was just like getting bullied in the group. And I didn't really have much self confidence or ability to stand up for myself either. And without loving myself, like I was always seeking that externally. And so the more I would seek it and the less I would get it, the more I would end up wanting to go seek it, right? Obviously, a lot of if you're in a certain place, and a lot of people are probably in a certain place where they get that self-love can be the thing that actually would solve that problem, but no one was telling me about self-love at that age.
right.
So um, time goes on, and I end up when I found that friend group, it felt so good, and I finally felt like I had more of an identity rather than always trying to fit in. Because, like, for
Mm,
example, I don't care too much about sports, and I felt like I would always be like trying to find some kids at the lunch tables and always be talking about sports with them because that's what they were talking about, and I thought that if I got to understand this thing, then they would like me, right? And I eventually kind of found this friend group where like I didn't have to pretend to be somebody. I was just me, and that's what worked. And so that was a lot of fun, and that didn't necessarily solve all my problems. And at a certain point in high school, I ended up diving really deep into nicotine, partying, drinking, smoking weed, all of that. Well, all of them actually in my freshman year, and started to get really, really good at it. And when I say good, obviously, like we just are doing it all the time.
mhm.
But I share that because, like, I mean, I even started selling weed. I sold weed for probably 5 years, different like
Wow.
e-cig things, all of that. Um,
Wow.
and I got to this point where that's what I started to get known as. And I started to get known as like, Eddie is this
Wow.
partier. Eddie is the guy to go to if you need to know of a party on this night, or if you need any type of drug, like hit up this guy or whatever it is. And so I started to kind of like build up this identity around being that, which at the time was super fun. Don't get me wrong. Like
Yeah.
it felt like a high school kid's dream to
Yeah.
be just going to so many parties and be kind of that cool kid,
The
especially after
guy.
I had been especially after I had been rejected for so many years from any friend group
Yep.
that I went to. Now all of these people that had rejected me are coming to me being like, hey, can I buy some of this thing? Or, hey, do you know about this? And so that felt, that was kind of like my ego, like doing this little like power trip thing. But like I said, it was fun at the time. And I got to this point after I graduated, I found myself in my freshman year of college now, where I realized that all of the partying and all that stuff, though it was fun, and we always do things as an attempt to solve a problem, right? And so I had self-worth and issues and like really like deep insecurities and social anxiety. So obviously like nicotine, I felt helped with that. Partying, I felt helped with that. All these things helped with it until they didn't. And it got to this point where I was like, you know what? None of this stuff is working. I still feel I've got this fake identity that makes me feel like the cool kid, but I don't feel like I actually have friends that really get the real me. Um, and that's because I wasn't the real me. I was still pretending to be someone else, just a different pretending to be somebody else. And so similar things started to happen. I mean, I remember being in my dorm one day and starting to just get kind of like pissed off at the world and realizing that something needed to change. And this was at a point like obviously so much had happened in that time. I had tried quitting smoking. I had tried quitting doing these things. I had tried to quit selling, but obviously like the friends that I had were still friends that I made through doing all of that. And so I was constantly reminded and just like in that atmosphere. Um, and obviously, like when I said I stopped selling weed, like people would still keep texting me, being like, "Hey, do you got this? Hey, do you have this?" And when making a bunch of money, when I could just casually make $200, $300, $400 by just responding to a
Right.
text message and doing a little short
Right.
thing, it was
Yep.
hard to say no to that for a while.
Yep.
But I got to this point where I was like, you know what, enough is enough because I actually don't like my life right now. And it was a very tough decision to make, but I found myself around springtime, actually about this time
Oh,
of my
wow.
freshman year, which was what, like, yeah, like 4 years ago now, which is crazy to think about. Because I remember it was like right around Easter when I kind of made this decision. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give up um, at least the selling of weed, and I'm going to really say yes to just pursuing something that feels more authentic to me, because at the time I was pursuing like an engineering major, and obviously there's nothing wrong with engineering, but it wasn't my passion, it wasn't my
Hmm.
calling, and it was just the thing that I was kind of told to do because I was good at math and science. um, and I got to this point though where like I just really made this strong decision to say, you know what, I'm going to say yes to what my soul wants to do because I've never been connected with it. I mean, at the time I had been like borderline atheist, like faith in God at like next to zero. Um, and I had got to this moment where, like I said, you know what, I mean, I wasn't going to kill myself, but it was like, I would rather be dead than keep going down this path and see where that ends up. Because you know, it got to the point where I was doing business on a certain level where cops were obviously going to get involved at a certain point. They'd already been involved in different instances. And it was only a matter of time until I ended up with like really big tickets or going to jail or whatever. Um, and especially with just like my health and everything, especially emotionally, I felt like
Hmm.
none of the coping mechanisms that I had in life were working. So at
Hmm.
a certain point, I said, you know what, I'm just going to take a break from everything. I decided to give up partying. I decided to give up weed. I decided to give up nicotine, alcohol. And I don't necessarily recommend trying to like go cold turkey on everything, but I
Yeah.
did that. um,
Wow.
and dropped out of college literally just to pursue all of the like inner work that was coming up from that. And really just recalibrate my life and
Wow.
figure out what I wanted to do with myself. And one thing kind of led to another, and that's when I started, just because obviously dropping out of college wasn't just like dropping out of college. For me, it was like, you know what, I'm going to leave this life that I've created and just like kind of sit and strategize, do my game plan for a little bit, and then figure out what I want to do next.
Hmm.
Um, and that felt really good because it was my ability to disconnect from all of the community that I had, which, don't get me wrong, I've got some amazing friends from my college days, but at the time with my goals, it wasn't really aligning to keep spending time with certain people. So
Hmm.
um, doing that led to, it's like one thing leads to another and life kind of just puts itself together. I had no idea what I was going to do. Like when I dropped out of college, it's not like I was like, all right, I'm going to drop out and go do this thing. I was like, I have no idea, but my soul, because over this period, I started to get really connected with my soul and my own intuition. And I was like, you know what? all that I've heard is that if my soul tells me to do something, I should do it. I have
Mhm.
no idea what's going to happen, and this doesn't make any logical sense. Like, it was literally on the first day of my sophomore year that I dropped out of college. I was like,
Wow.
why did I even do this? I just spent like a week getting prepared for the move and moving all, like, taking like 2 cars of stuff to go move into this house and
Oh,
everything. And literally 5 minutes into my first class, sophomore year, I was like, intuition, drop out of college. And I'm like, you're kidding
okay.
me. Yeah. But I trusted it. And so, like I said, that's what kind of started that process. And um, over time, that's how I ended up eventually getting a job at a roller skating rink, and which led to so many opportunities, which we kind of talked about earlier. But even that job came about because I wasn't invited back to a certain job that I had the summer before because of ways that I was
Oh,
acting. And
wow.
obviously, this was still times. So it's just really funny how the whole circle of life happens, because if I hadn't been not invited back to that one place, I wouldn't have gone applying for jobs. And if I hadn't gone applying for jobs, I wouldn't have got that job doing the DJ stuff. And I would have never even
Wow.
seeked out that job, first of all. And nor did I have any idea what ecstatic dance was. So obviously you can probably get what I'm getting at here. And there's still a whole next kind of chapter to all of this, because it's not like I went from all of that to just boom,
Boom.
like landing as the person I am. But to share something, and obviously I'm down to share more of that story, but something I've really come to realize is when you talk about like how did I become Eddie Evolves. um, this goes back to one of my first life coaches, who is actually who I went out to Bali with, back in 2019. uh, he told me, he towards the end of us working together, he goes, dude, you've changed so much since we started working together. I feel like it'd be cool if you called yourself Eddie Evolves. And
Mm.
that just like really stuck with me, because I mean, first of all, like alliteration, like Eddie Evolves just sounds
Mhm.
good. And second of all, I had been looking for some sort of like kind of like name like that or something catchy for a long time, but I didn't want to, one, I didn't want to give myself anything, and two, I didn't like feel like I knew what really was just like a ooh, like this resonates. um and also, I've got a really complicated last name. My last name is Birch. um Sounds like the tree, but it's spelled Bertsch. And so trying to tell people my email or my Instagram handle, or even have like just listen to people try to butcher my last name, like it's just been a thing in my life. And so like it was kind of like this added bonus where I was like, ooh, Eddie Evolves. So obviously I tell people that that's my last name, but also like Eddie Evolves is also the reminder to me that we can always evolve. Like
Mhm.
there's kind of two sides to this whole like self-development piece. There's the love and accept yourself for who you are right now. Like, yes to all of that. And I preach the exact same thing with everything that I do, all the content I make, everybody I work with. It's like, love and accept yourself exactly as you are. And
Mhm.
there's the other side of it where it's, you know what, is life is our school. Life is our learning process. We're going to keep learning our entire lives. We don't just learn through one traditional system,
Right.
right? And even since I dropped out of college, that's probably where I've done the most learning, because it's been like a whole different aspect of learning.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, but it's that reminder that we're always learning, we're always growing, we're always evolving. um, and that the person that I am right now isn't who I'm going to be in
Right.
a day, a month, a week, a year, 10
Yep.
years. Like, someone might look back at this podcast, they're going to be like, oh, Eddie Evolves, I'm going to look up his name. And this might be like 5 years later, and they're going to be like, holy crap, he doesn't look at all like that person. And like, I
Yeah.
mean, even a year ago, I had my hair, I just shaved off all my hair about a year ago. So maybe I'll have hair by then, but like it's just kind of that reminder, we're always growing in certain aspects. And this is also that permission slip and
Mhm.
reminder to do that, because
Yeah.
that's what life does.
That's so cool. Oh, Eddie, thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's such a cool journey. And I know is so relevant to so many people that have gone through very similar experiences and hardships, but have chosen to not also commit suicide, to keep living. And I love that thought of, and I think that was God source universe dropping it into you, like, well, what if it gets better, you know? And I think that's part of depression and suicide, is you're thinking like all of the what ifs, but most of the what ifs are not positive, you know? So I think that
Yeah.
was so timely, and so God, so the universe, just loving you and wanting you to stay in it, just a little longer so you could figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to get into ecstatic dance and body freedom because I think, at least just from what you shared with me on our call a couple of weeks ago, we got in deep into like body freedom and body shaming, and just the culture that is body shaming right now, and body image, and but also self-expression, and how there's PC ways to do that, and how people are breaking out of that. And so I love this movement that is really happening, which is ecstatic dancing, and just expressing yourself in this spiritual community, and abroad, and more. And I understand, because I did a little research. I understand it comes from like the tantric tradition, or um worldview. I don't know if it's technically a belief system, but it's more of just like how you view life, and how you view how things happen and what you experience. But I understand it's kind of maybe even rooted, or came out of maybe the tantric tradition. What are your thoughts and perspective on that?
You're talking to specifically ecstatic dance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I I guess I'll preface this saying I haven't dove super deep into specifically like the tantric philosophy myself,
Mhm.
and so I can't speak so confidently on that as like a whole concept. But obviously within my space, I mean, I've got tons of friends, whether it's guys, girls, everybody, that are more so in that space, and I would definitely agree with you in that sense of like, um, because to my understanding, and I might be butchering this, so I don't want to like speak too confidently on it. Um, Tantra is more so about like bringing our fullness to life, living
Mhm.
each moment as like the most important, pleasurable, important moment in the world. Um, because a lot of people think that Tantra is just about like sex and pleasure, when
Right.
more so, to my understanding, it's about bringing our like full
It's
life to
whole.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So to speak to that about ecstatic dance and like body freedom, and obviously jump in if you have any like questions to all of this. Um, Actually, yeah, I'll ask that. What specific part? What specific part are you curious about?
I think what's most interesting about ecstatic dancing is kind of what we were talking about earlier, where you're getting out, and like what you shared about your experience of getting out of your head and getting into your body and into what it wants to do, what it wants to express, what it wants to release. And I know, like, specifically moving energy, a lot of times when we move our physical bodies, we are moving energy in a big way. And so that's why I think, a lot of people end up working out in order to release, anger, resentment, bitterness, stress, negativity, unworthiness. And I know, like, when I go to the gym, like I did this morning, I was like, you got this, baby girl. 30 more seconds on these rope slams and you got it. And then you
Yes.
got 10 seconds on wall balls and then you're done. You got this, baby girl. You got it. And I just speak lovingly to myself, like, how would my best friend root me on? And that's a huge part of me overcoming any shame or any feeling of unworthiness, any insecurity in my body, because I'm a curvy girl. I am
Hmm.
not skinny. And I
Hmm.
I I know that I just want health, so that's why I'm working out. But I think
Yep.
that there's a lot of getting over of like, well, I need to look like this and I need to act like that and I need to move like this. And when I run, I
Yes.
need to have like this specific stride, and I know people feel that too with dancing and releasing. And so I think all that to say,
Totally.
around body freedom and figuring out how do you need to move? And I think that's a huge part probably of what you see of the evolution of people
Mm-hmm.
when they come into one of your dance sessions and they kind of overcome the fear, or just like the like, oh my god, like people are looking
Yeah.
at me. And so I'm sure you see that. And I guess what is like the end result, that you've seen, couple testimonials maybe, or
Yep.
um
Yep.
stories.
So yeah, first of all, there's kind of two aspects to this. There's that like that personal transformation of just like the moving energy, which we'll dive into both. I want to answer your direct question right here about like the body freedom, because yeah, that has been a huge thing for me. Obviously before, when I was like more in that like socially awkward space, I'm like thinking like, and I'm, for those of you guys that are listening, you won't be able to see this, but we're like recording on Zoom right now. So I was thinking like, oh,
Yeah.
if I move my hips like this, does that look good? Or
Yeah.
does my butt like stick out too
That's what
much?
I
Or is
was
my
doing.
back or my shoulders
Yeah.
too forward? Like what is it,
That
And
was so me at 12. I was like, okay, so pop, pop it
yeah.
out and then wiggle.
So there's that piece to it where it's like, oh, the self-consciousness, like how does this look? But then there's also um for a lot of people, and this it's different for everyone. Like
Yeah.
like vulnerability looks different for every single person. What I just did may have been somebody's edge. You might ask
Yeah.
someone else to do that and they'd be like,
They would never
nope,
get up.
nope, I'm not going to show
Mm-mm.
you my butt, I'm not going to move my hips like that, nope, nope, nope. um but then at the same time, like, even I have edges. Like my growth edges continue, and I'm sure I've got them. Like next time I find one, I'll be like, all right, here we go, here's an opportunity. um but especially in the space, like I've witnessed so much amazing transformation, and that looks different for every person. And one of the big reasons, and I guess the two conversations I was just talking about are going to tie together here,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because what inspired me to create and start sharing Ecstatic Evolution, which is my ecstatic dance workshop slash like ceremony. What inspired me to share it in the way that I do has been my own journey. And so when you talk about like moving energy, I would come to these moments, and whether it's one of those really really deep like suicidal moments, or really just like feeling kind of frustrated at life, I would come to these moments where I'm like, you know what, I can't just think my way out of this. I've tried journaling, but I'm still like, there's something here. And so I would often use music, and I would curate these playlists for myself of these like musical journeys for my
Mm.
own healing. I would, if I was feeling frustrated, I would turn on some like rage music and just start like beating my chest, like screaming, like just doing all sorts of movement. And over the course of that playlist, I might bring that into something that's more flowy, where it's like, ooh, I'm actually feeling myself now. Like I'm in a whole different vibe than where I was just like really deep in my like powerful masculine. Now I'm kind of in my
Mhm.
like smooth, watery feminine. And finishing it with like different, obviously, like I curate these musical journeys all the time with what I do. It's all about just like finding music that evokes a different emotion. um and so I would sometimes those are the experiences that are super super vulnerable for people, where just being able to feel that stuff,
Yeah.
and because sometimes these songs, they'll have people crying, and
Oh
people
yeah.
might be just laying on the ground starfished in the middle of a thing. And obviously I do this online and in person, like it kind of depends. And obviously with the current state of the world, some people prefer online things. So um but yeah, whatever it is, like something to get someone in touch with their feelings, like, ooh, that's the edge. But then there's also the body things, where a lot of people grow up in homes, and this definitely is true for men and women, but I find that women specifically experience a lot of this, because of the way that they are like kind of situationally sexualized in our culture, where there's this idea that you're supposed to be sexy, but you can't be too sexy,
Mhm.
right? There's like, it's like, oh, as a woman you're supposed to look nice, and I'm speaking on behalf of society right now. There's this idea like, as a woman you're supposed to look nice, but then there's also the, oh, don't show off too much of your thighs, or don't share that much of your shoulder, or don't move your
Mhm.
body like that. um and I had someone come into one of my workshops a few weeks ago, and it felt for me. Like, obviously I hold this space for a whole bunch of people. I get that things can come up and I'm always prepared for
Yep.
that.
Yep.
There, and I say that too because I've experienced all of this. I've kind of
Mm-hmm.
gone through my own healing of different aspects through this dance, and so that's what inspires me to create it for other people, because it's done so much for me. Now it's like, I mean, it got to the point where all my friends were wanting it, and so many people had asked me to do it on social media. I was like, you know what? To say no to this is just like saying no to what my heart really wants to do and what the world really needs right now. But this girl came in and, you know, like I said, it appeared as like a normal ecstatic dance for me, which nothing's ever normal, but we had fun the whole time. And at the end, I opened up a space to hear some shares from some of the people that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And she spoke up to share. And she was having a lot of fun during the dance. Don't get me wrong. Like we don't just play like deep feeling music. Like it's a fun time. But she shared, she was like, and she got very emotional, broke down, crying. Like we were all just like holding that space for her as she went through her process. And she was like, wow, I never realized how much I grew up in a household. And I'm pretty sure I think she was from somewhere in India, or at least somewhere kind of in that like Asian culture. So it's similar in
Mm-hmm.
there. This is true for many parts of the world, but obviously like we all grow up in different homes and different cultures and stuff, which have
Right.
different ideas. And she started talking about, like, she's like, I grew up in a home where I was always shamed for moving my body like that. And I was grown up with this idea that as a woman, you should never move your body in that way.
Wow.
Right. And it started to open me up in such amazing ways to be able to like witness people's growth in this, because obviously that, just like I shared when I was like thinking about, well, what are people going to think of me, then all of a sudden my life starts to change. Like things have been the
Mm-hmm.
same for her. Like I've started to see her when I think we connected a few weeks before that through social media, and we become friends now, and like seeing the way that she has evolved just in what she shares and some of the conversations that we've had, it has been such a blessing to be able to see
Mm-hmm.
that like this is just one experience that has helped in that process. And it's true like that across the board. I had another friend that I co-hosted my workshop with the other day, probably like a month ago at this point. And what did she say? She has and she's been in sort of like ceremonies and stuff. And I don't know if you're familiar with plant
Mm-hmm.
medicine, things like
Mm-hmm.
ayahuasca.
Yeah.
She told me at the end of the dance, she was like, Eddie, and because she's right there with me in terms of like we met through a coaching program. She's also like deep in this sort of like spiritual space. And she was like, Eddie, whatever you just did, I feel like I got out of an ayahuasca ceremony. And
Wow.
that was such a blessing to hear, because first of all, I mean, I didn't do anything. Like I hold the space for it, but I'm not going
Right.
to take credit for what she experienced. That was
Right.
her journey with being here. But to be able to hear that was really meaningful to me, because those are the same experiences that I've had, in the sense of like sometimes when we're on these medicines, whether it's like ayahuasca or mushrooms or anything like that, if people have done them, you don't need to do them in order to experience absolute bliss. But sometimes when I was on those things, it's like, oh, how do I find this when I'm sober? And like this for me, I can only speak my own truth in my own life. Dance, and specifically like this kind of like ecstatic form of dance, has been
Mm-hmm.
the one of the most, if not the most transformational things for me, on top of
Wow.
anything else. Whether it's breath work, I mean, I've done all sorts of healings. Like I said, I used to be in therapy for years. I've done probably many types of drugs, almost, I mean, I'm not going to say everything because I haven't gone super deep into like the hard ones, but I've done quite a few drugs. And even outside of drugs, I've done a lot of different like plant medicines and more things in like a
Mm-hmm.
ceremonial intentional space, you know,
Mm-hmm.
yoga, breath work, journaling, meditating, like you name it, and I've
Yeah.
probably done it, or at least come close. And still, ecstatic dance is one of like the best things for me, because especially when we're in that space of just like not knowing, not having whatever clarity we feel we need to have, like there's something that comes from the somatic transformation of things, because whether it's trauma or whether it's just us trying to figure something out, like all this stuff is stored in our body, and the more that we're able to loosen that up and actually move things through, like all of a sudden it's like I'm like, oh, I can't see my computer, I can't see my computer, and then I just like move my hands and the computer's right there,
Mhm.
and I can't think my way to have my computer appear. It's like sometimes it's just like that. um yeah.
It's so good.
I'd love to hear what you're hearing from this. Obviously I love to kind of just go on these rants and after hearing a question, but
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that was so good. I was thinking while you were talking about how dance is in like every culture, and just specifically for me, like I'm 1/8 Native American, but there's something about the way that Native, and every tribe is so different. Um, but the way that they dance is so expressive, um and there is a touch of like animalisticness to it, where they move in different ways because they're embodying different energies. And one of the things that we also talked about on the phone call was, and this isn't on like your Zoom sessions, this is just in person, but you also open it up so that people can actually drop their clothes, and that adds an aspect of vulnerability and openness, and also just like shedding any shame around your body, because you're in a room with a bunch of people, and it's not forced or anything. It's, you were clear about that it's definitely like, if you're comfortable, you're welcome to do this, to undress to the level of your comfort, is how they say when you get a massage.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
but I just thought that was like crazy cool that that is offered, because I'm sure for a lot of people, um taking off what we typically have on in public, that is kind of like a reckoning moment, and like a, okay, do I feel like this is in alignment with me, and is this going to help me to step into more freedom? And I thought that was cool. I didn't realize that that was a part of it until you mentioned it, and we giggled a little bit because I
Hmm.
was like, oh my god. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
you never catch me doing it personally, but I know for so
Yep.
many people, like that is such a huge offering of being able to do that, and move. You're
Yeah.
not just
So
taking off clothes, you're also dancing, and dancing as free as a baby,
yeah.
which is really cool.
Yeah. So nudity has been a huge part of my journey too. Just as I talk about overcoming anything, and just because you overcome something doesn't mean it doesn't still come up. Um, but nudity has been a thing that, especially as a society, we are conditioned from.
Yeah.
You could argue since birth, definitely since birth in a lot of ways, because we're born into this world with this
Mhm.
conversation going on. And the conversation I'm talking about, whether it is a conscious, like verbal conversation, or whether whether it's an implied, contextual, like unconscious conversation. There's this conversation about nudity is not okay. Our bodies
Mhm.
are something that we're supposed to hide. Our bodies are something that we're supposed to shame. And don't get me wrong, like I'm all for the sacredness of the human body, right?
Mhm.
Like it's not like we should just go around like exposing ourselves to people if we don't want to.
Right.
Like everybody, just like what you shared, like because you don't want to do ecstatic, or because you wouldn't want to do something that with nudity, at least right now. I don't take
Yeah.
that as like, oh, she's not willing to grow. It's like, hey, maybe she just doesn't want to have people looking at her naked body, you know?
Yeah.
But it's especially to break down the concepts around like sexualizing things, right? And like
Yes.
look at, for example, like if any of you guys have, if you or anyone else has like gone to the beach or something like that, or a lake
Yep.
or whatever, or pool, almost always, or at least at some point in your life, somebody has seen a kid, or they've done it themselves. Someone has seen a kid on the beach naked, just like a little 2 or 4, or even like 6 year old, just like playing in the water, no pants, no shirt, whether it's a guy or a girl, whatever, they're doing their thing. And the parents are always right nearby, right? Like I was out in Los Angeles, like probably about this time last year, and I remember being on the beach, just like walking, and I had jumped in a few times, and I have these like tight underwear, so it kind of acts like a swimsuit to me. Um, and I was jumping in the ocean, and I remember like walking on the beach, and I saw these two little kids playing naked, and I looked over, and like all the parents are over there, and as I kind of glanced, they like waved their hands, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? And like nothing wrong with that. Those are just two kids naked playing on the beach. Whereas if I would have done that, we've got this whole conversation as a society where it's like, oh, that's inappropriate. This dude is now like a pedophile exposing himself to people and like all this stuff, right? Because all of a sudden, once we hit the ages of like maybe 9, 10, 11, 12, our bodies go from innocent and playful to sexualized, and you have to hide that. And somehow the naked body becomes this aspect to shame. And like I said, shame and
Yeah.
sexualize.
And
And
as a man,
especially
you become a predator, right?
exactly. And especially with like the porn industry and adult entertainment and stuff, we grow up where we're not seeing nudity when we go to the pools and stuff anymore. The only times we're seeing nudity is in the porn. So obviously
Right.
it's going to make sense that our brain associates the naked body with sex, because the only time that we experience that is when we see two people doing that.
Right.
um, Obviously this is a super deep conversation, but especially on the note that you were talking about with like the animalistic side of things,
Mm-hmm.
that is an aspect. And what I do isn't like any other ecstatic dance. Obviously I love the fun, playful aspect of things, but especially on that note of like nudity, I mean, I'm not doing this on my Zooms, but in person. I mean, for example, like with one of the last retreats that I co-hosted, we went there. We really went there. We did a whole workshop beforehand on some different stuff, and before the dance started, we did a nudity workshop to really just like express that and to be seen, to do that next level of what in that moment was acceptance and love, and just like really, like I said, being seen and expression. And obviously it's all up to people's comfort level. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I would never like force anyone to go anywhere, but especially with this ask, it's like, hey, you know, to your comfort level. um Preferably, I'm not even going to say preferably because I don't even like to put limits on it, but um to like underwear or like bra and underwear is always like perfectly acceptable, and if people want to go further, you know. And it's not to turn the whole thing into this like this weird sexual thing. It's more so for us to just tap in and really be there as humans in the way that we were born. Because you
Yep.
know, I'm not this scarf, I'm not this necklace, I'm not this shirt. Like at the end of the day, every single person is naked just under their clothes.
Right.
um and it's for me, it's because this is, like I said, ecstatic evolution, like all the stuff that I do is healing for me too. um it's healing for me, and I see it be healing for others, and so it's something that I'm just so passionate about, which is obviously why we're even having this conversation on it too. But yeah, it's seriously been a gift to be in this space with other people, because being able
Mm-hmm.
to experience the transformation that they have, um, often, whether it's something that I've been through, or sometimes people are even inspiring me in ways that I haven't even like thought of before too. So it's just really fun space for us to just get in touch with that, you know.
I think it's so powerful to be in a room with people that are holding space for your deepest insecurities, shame, and vulnerability and authenticity, because there's no way that you can hide in an environment like that. And so it's really cool that it's a safe place and that it's a place that you get to hold space for other people and other people get to hold space for you. And I think that is so cool, so unique in such a unique way. And so I love that you do this and that you create this and you hold space for that experience for people and for that transformation and that moment of liberty and freedom and throwing down shame and even guilt, for not being what you think you should be like, or where you should be in your life right now. I'm sure a lot of people also come with that. So it's not just physical, it's also where you are in your journey. We have a lot of criticism and judgment about, I should be this, I should be that, I should be here. Well, I'm turning 34. I should have a family, I should have a kid. I should have this, I should have that. I should be more
So much.
advanced in my career, right? It could go on and on and on and on and on. And I love the fact that this is a moment that people can share with within themselves with other people that are doing the same thing, and they can have a moment where they are holding space for other people, which is super powerful and it's super transformational doing that, because you realize what the gift that you have for other people, what you can give, and then you get to receive at the same time. And so cool, Eddie, and we need to talk more about this because gosh, we could go on for forever. But I love that this is a great intro and that we could share also your journey, which is so powerful. And that alone is going to encourage somebody. Somebody's going to hear that and go, gosh, that was me. And just in a different costume, but like Eddie did it, I can do it, and they can add evolves at the end of their nickname if they want, because like they can basically just hone on to that. Like, I am ever evolving, ever changing, ever transforming, ever healing. And that is part of my journey. And it's okay to be where I am right now. And I love that about your testimony, journey, story as well, because you were so okay with the fact that, you know what, this is where I am. And you even look back and you're like, it was fun. And it wasn't a very good place, like as far as like super beneficial and for your highest good, but it's where you were then. And that was part of your journey and part of your experience, which is so powerful.
I would even just jump in to share. Though I didn't know it at the time, and I wouldn't necessarily consciously choose it right now, it most definitely was for my highest good. And
cool.
I'm super grateful that it happened.
Yeah.
And especially on that note with like the whole evolution and things, like, life continues to do life. Like everybody's always going to be faced with a challenge. And one of the biggest things I guess I would share leaving off, and obviously I know our conversation is probably going to end in a couple of minutes here, but finding a way to enjoy the process of our evolution has been super important for me.
Yeah.
Because there's always this idea of, all right, I just need to go into that growth, like spiritual growth, personal growth is going to be tough, when like, yeah, some aspects of it are absolute garbage. Like it just hurts. Sometimes I don't like going through it, but at the same time, like finding ways to move that energy through and just find bliss even while I'm still in that process, because like we're always going to be in the process, has been super huge for me.
That's awesome, Eddie. Yeah, I love what you said about it was for your highest good, because that was a choice that you made too. And I love how our journeys, whether the hard times, the difficult times, even the times that we may have shame around it, it's like, no, that actually is part of your journey and a part of where you are now and how you get to where you want to go. And so I love that you kind of corrected that, because it's a good correction as far as having that perspective of that everything, if we choose, benefits us in our life and in our journey. There's really nothing you can't use to benefit you, to learn and grow from, to enjoy. So I love that, Eddie. Thank you so much for sharing. Gosh, this was so good. And I can't wait to have you back on so we can just go even deeper.
Yeah.
Feel like we just touched the surface.
I always love jumping into episode 2, 3, 4, whatever it ends up turning into. So more than happy to do this. And yeah, thank you for having me too.
Such a blessing. Thank you so much, Eddie.